3 left. Ever played Peg Solitaire as a kid? All this involved was a bit of lathe work, a bit of colouring, a bit of laser work and a bit of CNC work. I've got a piece of tulip wood on here and it's 27mm thick by 254mm on the diameter there. And the plan is here to face off the bottom. This is going to be the bottom. It's held onto a small waste block with hot glue, and then I'm going to use my large M-Jaws where I just want to put a shallow mortise in there to then turn this around and hold it on the chuck. Ideal size for a mortise for these M-Jaws is around about 125mm. This has now been sanded to 400 grit, and next thing I want to do is just get this over to my CNC machine and laser my logo on the back here before I do anything else. Logo is now printed on there quite nicely. Really pleased with that. Now I want to darken all this wood up just to really bring out the grain on this as well. So I've gone for the chestnut spirit stains, and I've chosen the antique mahogany, which I've used in a few of my projects just recently. Yeah, I think that's going to be fine. Now I'm just going to get a thinner piece of paper towel or something just to get down the edges there so I can get all the whites, and then I'm going to leave this to dry. This has now been left to dry since yesterday, and I've got to say, really pleased the way this has come up. Even after applying the colour, this wood is still so smooth. There's been no raising of the grain whatsoever, so you can see the difference from what the original is to the coloured. When you normally apply colour, then want to put a sanding sealer on, using it via the method I'm going to now with the paper towel this way can often not lead to obviously the colour bleeding and lifting, which is why a lot of people use the spray version of the sanding sealer. Now, because this is all just one colour and I don't think it's going to lift too much anyway, that's why I'm going to use this method. It's certainly coming off, but it's still got the colour on there. So I'm going to let that dry off, and then I'll knock it back with a Niweb and then give that another coat. The back has now had a couple of coats of sanding sealer and just knocked back with a Niweb. So I've now mounted this onto my M-Jaws So the first job is to take off this waste block, true up the outside, and then start shaping the front here. And for taking off the waste block, I'm just going to use the thin parting tool. I want to heat up the glue, and then it will then just pull off. Should, okay, just come straight off. And just to make sure it's totally flat, I'm going to go over this with my sanding board. Normally I'd put chalk on here to see where everything was level, but I don't want to do that because the chalk will get left in the grain and it will then be still showing up when I've finished. I've just marked the centre point on here, and for where I'm going to be working on the CNC, it's going to be within a diameter of 180mm in the middle there. So I'm just going to mark a line on here just outside, probably about 92mm out, 92, 93. So I just need to make sure I keep outside that line. So the next job is to create a recess in here so that the marbles can sit in a tray on the outside, and then I may well just do a little bit of shaping on the outside. So that'll be deep enough to hold those in. So I'll just do something on the outside edge here, and then it's just got to be sanded up, and then it's ready to go on the CNC. This has now been sanded to 400, and that's come up quite nicely actually. And the next job is now to get this onto the CNC to cut out all the little holes. Got the piece now on the CNC, and I've used the tape and CA method, where you just put tape on both of your pieces and a bit of CA in between, and it's held on there nice and tight. So the program on here is now all ready. The scheduled time for this is saying around about 8.5 hours, 8 3/4 hours. However, the actual run time on this I know is going to be at least 12 hours. So I'm going to start this off on here, and we can already see the hours are already going up, which will really drop down. So that's now going to run for the next probably 12-13 hours. The final run time on this was just over 13 hours, so it wasn't far out, and that's what I'm left with a nice dusty piece, so I'm just going to get this vacked off and get this pulled off. Should lift off there quite easily. I've just put this back on the chuck because it's going to be a lot easier to apply the colouring on there, so I'm going to use the antique mahogany again like I did on the back. This is why the CNC takes so long and why it was 13 hours on there, because it's gone into such fine detail on the curves for all these holes that there's no tear out or anything on there, that it's every single one is really smooth. So had to do nothing on there. I just literally ran a bit of 600 grit paper over the top just to take out any little fuzzies that might be on the edge there. And I'll try and get into the holes at the end. So I'm going to let that dry off and then give that a coat of sanding sealer again, the same as I did with the back. This has just been left to dry for probably about 20 minutes, and I'm just going to apply the sanding sealer again like I did on the back, so the colours will come off onto the cloth a bit. I'm just going to take this off the chuck because it's going to be easier to drop some sanding sealer in each of those holes. I'm going to let that dry off, and then I'll probably give that a second coat, and then I'll knock that back with an iWeb. Now I've given this probably about 3 coats of sanding sealer on the top here, and the main reason for that is the better surface I get down there to start with, the less lacquer I'm going to use and the better its finish is going to be. So for the bottom here, I'm going to spray the bottom first of all, and not too bothered about getting it on the sides, so I'm just looking to get the bottom done, and I'm just using ordinary cheap spray lacquer. I want to get probably 2 or 3 coats on the base here, leave it until tomorrow, and then I can then carry it to the top. And with this, when you do the spray lacquer, it's best to do it as light as possible, so you don't want to put heavy coats on, just gentle going over the top. I'll now leave that about 15-20 minutes before I then give it a second coat. This is now finished, and I've got to say I'm really pleased with this one. So originally a piece of tulip wood, very much like that, very plain and very light in colour. Turned the back flat and put a large mortise in there to hold into my large M-type jaws. Bit of laser work just to put my logo in there, and then turned the top. The important thing was to get this surface as flat and even as possible, because when I put this on the CNC, it's working down to fractions of a millimetre, so that it tries to get these all as even as possible. And the lip on this, I've made this nice and deep, so that hopefully if you picked it up and moved it about a bit like that, the marbles are not going to tip out the edge. Finish wise, I've just used an ordinary cheap spray lacquer. Back has only had about 3 or 4 coats, and I've just knocked that back a bit with a bit of iWeb, so it's got a matte feel to it. Now the top and the sides, I've given this probably about 8 or 10 coats of spray lacquer. I've not knocked this back at all because there's no roughness on this whatsoever. It's kept really smooth, which is unusual for a spray lacquer. And it's got a nice sheen to it, and I think that really works well on this piece. Colour wise, I've used the antique mahogany, and using these clear marbles, I think it works well with the dark colour on there. Thanks a lot for watching.